What's up? This is your boy Tico Trent, aka the Internal Sadist. And this video is going to be about this live podcast is going to be about this hello hello America's Seville. This podcast is going to be about basically it's going to be about like the talking points that we always hear about in the manosphere for all intents purposes. All the talking points that we normally hear about in the manosphere is what we're going to talk about today. Well, not all of them, just five of them for right now, because I don't want it to be running any longer than it needs to for all intents purposes. Now, one of the many talking points that you'll hear about in the manosphere is the talking points of, you know, the alpha male, the the alpha male, the alpha male, the maintain your frame, the maintaining of your frame, alpha males, pump and dump, black pillar is greater than red pill, monetization is better. Content that's monetized is better content. Those are going to be the topics of today. The problem with a lot of these talking points is just that they're problems. They're very divisive. They're very divisive topics for all intents purposes. Because at the end of the day, once you break it down and you actually pay attention to all the stuff, and you pay attention to you pay attention to a lot of the stuff in the manosphere when it comes to red pill, red pill aware and stuff like that, you tend to realize that the red pill isn't just one thing. It's a plethora of things. It's a broad spectrum of things for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is it's so broad spectrum. A lot of the red pill content creators haven't even began to dive into what the red pill actually is. Some of them are only stuck in like certain areas of the red pill, but the red pill concept and philosophy is vast. It's about as vast as space. If you want to make give it an analogy. And the sad part about that is when we talk about it, if you listen to it, it's all about knowledge and getting out of the matrix and this, that, and the other, and tapping into higher knowledge for all intents purposes. So when you hear people say like, "Well, I'm doing this because it's all about knowledge and it's greater than this and it's better than this," the problem with that is you can't be greater than something that was invented first. It would never be greater than something that was invented before what you have going on for all intents purposes. Because at the end of the day, the whole entire red pill philosophy is vast. It dives into more than just women. It dives into more than just government. It dives into more than just politics. It dives into more than just you know various aspects of children and everything. It's a vast sea of stuff that you can gather from red pill knowledge for all intents purposes. So you can't make something better if you haven't mastered it in the first damn place. You can't say something's better than something that you never mastered. That'd be like me saying I took kung fu for 2 years. I took kung fu for a year. My kung fu's more superior than your kung fu. If you know what I mean. Especially if you haven't ingested all the knowledge that you can get from being red pill or learning the red pill philosophy for all intents and purposes. The problem is you start running into people who start branching off and getting more ridiculous and absurd for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where you're always going to hear various things when it comes to these very topics, and these five topics that I named, which were pump and dump, maintaining your frame, being an alpha, you know, um, being an alpha, you know, uh, black pillars, and monetization makes content better for all intents and purposes. You'll start hearing these things, and it's like no, because the truth is to be told, not to be sold. But we'll run with that. We'll just let you run with that. Um, when it comes to my thoughts on monetization, when it comes to content, no, it doesn't make it better. It just makes you more biased. That's pretty much all it really is. Because how it works is instead of paying attention to your whole entire base, you're only paying attention to a small portion of your base. That's typically how that works. You're only paying attention to a small portion of your base. So basically, you may say you care about your whole entire base, but you only care about your base that pays you or your base that, gives you money. That's typically how it works. So it makes you more biased when it comes to your content and who you're going to respond to and who you're not going to respond to. The thing about it that I've learned with a lot of these bigger content creators is you don't necessarily have to give them money to get your point across. If you word something just right in their comment section, they're going to see it. They're going to notice it, and you're going to see the panic on their face. I've done it multiple times. Trust me. It's not like they don't see it. They just ignore it unless you got money in front of it for all intents and purposes. It's typically how that works. So it's one of those things where it's like monetization doesn't make content better. It just makes you more biased towards people who's willing to give you money. That's all it really is. So the content is pretty much still the same. Because the sad part about that, if monetization made the content better, then you wouldn't have to steal from smaller content creators to actually get more ideas or better ideas for all intents and purposes. The irony to that is that's something that you're starting to see lately. Well, since I've started, that's something you're starting to see, period, in the manosphere where bigger content creators are stealing from smaller content creators and not even giving them the credit due for all intents and purposes. That's perfectly fine and all, but at the end of the day, if you get an idea from a smaller content creator, the least you could do is shout out that smaller content creator for all intents and purposes. So monetization doesn't make your content better. What it does is actually makes you more biased in your content when you respond to certain people in your comment section. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people that'll say, well, I got too many subs to respond to everybody. That's nice and all, but at the end of the day, I look at it like this. There's apps that can actually help you streamline that so you can respond back to people better. You don't necessarily have to make long ass diatribes. I've specialized in like giving short and to the point answers to various people when I need to. So you can actually use short and to the point answer. You don't got to do diatribes to actually get your point across and respond to everybody. You can respond to everybody. Trust me, there's a content creator that has 1 million subs that responds to every single person in his comment section right now. And that's typically how it works. So no, that's a lazy ass excuse for you not responding to your subscribers that actually put comments on your thing. And it's a lazy ass excuse for all that stuff because, like I said, that content creator literally responds to every single person that leaves a comment for him in his comment section. That's typically how this stuff works. That's the cold hard truth behind it too. So that pretty much gets rid of the whole entire, monetization makes content better, makes it better for all intents and purposes when it don't. Because at the end of the day, like I said, it makes you more biased. It makes you more biased on how you respond to people and who you respond to and how your content flows. Then on top of that, just because you get monetized and you have your stuff monetized and people give you money, that don't mean you come up with your own fresh ideas. A lot of the larger content creators typically steal from the smaller content creators, and they get more credit for it than you do for all intents and purposes. It sucks, but it's the nature of the beast. So the sad part about that, a lot of these larger content creators are running out of ideas, so they go and steal from smaller content creators to do so. A good example of that is the rolling videos that MGTOW the Win does. A bigger content creator actually stole that and ran with it. And the sad part about that, Win doesn't even get credit for it, but Win pretty much started it before that content creator did. And now that content creator actually gets credit for what Win actually started. Another good example is a lot of the topics I talk about on my channel. If you look at a lot of these bigger channels, they conveniently become topics on these bigger channels, or they'll reword it in a way so they can make it sound like it's their own. But it's nonetheless, if you pay attention, it's the same damn thing I just spit on my channel. And it's typically one of those things. So it is what it is. Like I've heard stuff that Janky said in the Janky show that bigger content creators sat up there and ran with, like ridiculously. So it's one of those things where monetization doesn't make it better. And that's pretty much all it really is. They want to make excuses for, they steal content and they basically take ownership for the content because you're a small creator. And it is what it is. And I understand that. However, if you're going to take the content, at least give the smaller channels the credit due from where you stole it from. I'm pretty sure you know what channel you stole it from, so you can't pretend like you didn't know which one you got it from. Especially when I'm on your channel, talk about, oh yeah, I remember that comment when I actually did it last year. I remember that topic when I did it last year, motherfucker. Damn, but it's cool though, and it's one of those things where it's like it's a learning experience that you have to learn, and I actually like it. I actually like it, enjoy it better because my channel is small and I still can get stuff out faster than a lot of these bigger content creators. However, it's while still maintaining a large catalog, just in case shit happens to my channel, if I get a strike or something like that, I maintain a large catalog where I can still upload videos, even if I'm in timeout for 2 weeks. So I think I have like a month's worth of content that is on private that's waiting to go up, just in case shit happens. It's typically how that works. So it's one of those things where like it's pretty fun to do, and it's not hard to do and run a channel because, like I said, I run 20, so therefore I know it's not that hard. And now that I think about it, I'm actually one of those. I'm one of those content creators that has over 1 million on my one channel that responds to every single comment on my channel. There's like three or four other ones that actually do that. Moving right along to the next topic. Black pill is greater than red pill. No, it's not. It's not. Like I was saying at the beginning of the stream, red pill's vast. Red pill is a vast knowledge of things. Here's how it typically works. Just like we always make the quote from MGTOW, all MGTOWs are red pill, but not all red pills are MGTOW. The same thing goes for black pillars. All black pillars are red pill, but not all red pillars are black pill. You see what I'm saying? You see how that works? Basically what that means is it's nothing more than a subsection of the red pill philosophy. That's all it really is. And if I had to pick and choose between which one actually requires you to have more knowledge between MGTOW and black pill, I would have to give it to MGTOW. MGTOW requires you to have more knowledge, more self-control, and more awareness than black pill does. Because the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, MGTOW is a vast within itself. However, MGTOW is nothing more than a subsection of red pillars. So think of it like this: you got your Marines, you got your regular army men, basically. You got your Marines, then you got your special forces for all intents and purposes. Basically, not all black pill is a specialty under the red pill philosophy. That's all it really is. It's nothing more than a specialty that focuses on a certain thing under the red pill philosophy. The same thing goes for MGTOW, but however, MGTOW covers more ground than black pill for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, you got 6 levels of MGTOW, depending on what chart you look at, and all those levels of MGTOW basically goes from beginner to living off the grid. So you pretty much have people just breaking into the game. You got the people who are pretty much, preppers. So think of that. So you go from, people at the bottom that are just getting into the game, then you go all the way to the preppers. Just below the preppers, you got the monks. And that's typically how that works. So you got the monk, you got the preppers, you got the monks. This is going down from top to bottom. So at the top, you got the preppers, you got the monks, and you got like level 4, you got level 3s, then you got level 2s, and you got level 1s, basically. And the sad part about that, just the monks and the preppers alone have a vast more knowledge than a black pillar by themselves. A level 4 has more knowledge than a black pillar. A level 3 probably would have the same amount of knowledge as a black pillar. A level 2 would probably, depending on where he's at in his transition, he has almost the same, if not just as much as a black pillar. And the level 1s are just breaking in and are just learning stuff for all intents and purposes. So they're the newbies on the job for all intents and purposes. But at the end of the day, when it comes to MGTOW and gathering knowledge, there's a lot more knowledge under the MGTOW umbrella than there is under the black pill umbrella. This is typically why it's hard to reach monk or reach monk or prepper or off-grid status for all intents and purposes. You can't just walk in and just reach off-grid status. or reach monk status for all intents and purposes. You actually got to work on that. You actually got to train your body and teach yourself these things. And it's typically how that works. Because, like I was saying, if a good example of that is I always talk about this when I always talk about when I jokingly say if I didn't go to Tijuana, I would be MGTOW. And that's true. However, what I also leave out is if I didn't go to Tijuana, I'd be a monk. Also, and it's simply one of those things where it's like, it's not the fact that I would be a monk for the fact that I would be a monk for the fact that, I actually have more control over my body, and I have control over my body, and it's always mind over matter when it comes to my little head. I always have more control over my little head than most people. So it's one of those things where it's like I can literally look at a bunch of women and not embarrass myself in public for all intents and purposes. The best way I could put it to you. Um, so it's one of those things where it's like only way I'm getting hard is morning wood, or if I'm about to have sex. That's it. I can look at women all day. I can watch women pass me all day, naked, strip club, stripping in front of me, a porno, everything. Mind over matter. Because it's one of those things where it's like, I literally think about nothing while watching all this stuff. Like when a woman walks past me, there's no thought in my head, and I literally think about nothing. Mind over matter. So it's like, if I'm thinking about nothing, it's very hard to actually get into my psycho. It's very hard to manipulate me subconsciously when I'm not thinking about anything. It's simply one of those reasons why I always like going to sleep, because I can go to sleep very quickly for the fact that my mind's not racing like most other people. Mind over matter. So it's one of those things where I have enough control, self-control, to control myself from getting myself into a whole lot of hot messes that a lot of people normally can't get themselves out of, or normally have a problem with getting their not normally have a problem with controlling themselves from getting into. So it's one of those things where at the end of the day, you're dealing with mind over matter for all intents and purposes. Is typically all it really is. And the sad part about that, there's not too many people that can actually literally say that they have more control over their appendage than most other people, or they have that much control over their appendage, period. It's typically how that works. Moving right along to um pump and dump. We'll do pump and dump next. The biggest misconception of pump and dump is that it's better than pickup artistry, or it's different from pickup artistry, or it's different. The fact of the matter is it's not different. It's really not different in the least bit. Pump and dump is basically a nice wing of pickup artistry. The same thing goes for the whole entire red pill philosophy. Pickup artistry is nothing more than a wing of the red pill. Just like dating coaches, just like black pill, just like MGTOW, just like it's basically nothing more than a wing of all that stuff. It's basically a wing of the red pill. That's all it really is, because you're learning how to manipulate women, and that's a certain section of the red pill, which makes it red pill. No matter how you look at it, it's all red pill. Pickup artistry is red pill. This dom game bullcrap is dead red pill. All this stuff is basically nothing more than red pill. We might call it the ranosphere, but it's all red pill. It's all red pill knowledge. Every single thing that you learn is red pill knowledge. Red pill knowledge is so vast. It's basically like the universe. Think of it like the universe. You got certain sections of the universe, like the Milky Way galaxy. You got this other galaxy. You got Alpha Centauri's over here. You got all this stuff. You got a couple black holes over here, basically, and that's typically how that works. So it's one of those things where it's like these are nothing more than parts of this vast universe for all intents and purposes. Um, Another good example of that is when it comes to pump and dump, is people always try to make it sound like it's not as bad, or it's not as bad as pickup artistry. But the problem with it is you're basically practicing and doing the same daggone thing that they're doing. What it shows is you lack control, therefore you need to get your rocks off. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you do that. That's fine if you want to do that, but just know that I view you differently than I view somebody over here, like somebody that's a monk, or somebody that's a level 3 or 4 for all intents. I mean, a level 4 for all intents and purposes. It's typically how that works because you're giving into your base carnal desire, and you're giving into your basically you're letting your little head think for your big head for all intents and purposes. So when you actually do pump and dump, you're doing nothing more than letting your little head think for you. So your dick gets hard, now you got to go stick it in something. The sad part about that is it takes more energy and effort to actually control yourself from wanting to stick your dick in something than it does from just sticking your dick in something. And the sad part about that is you may say, well, it takes a lot of physical energy out of you. Well, so what? Where's the mental energy at in this? None. Okay, then you've done expended mental energy. You could have saved that much physical energy and exerted mental energy and learned how to give yourself a better tolerance. Because the sad part about that, pump and dump is nothing more than if you were, good example, an addict. You're basically on the same level as an addict for all intents and purposes. You have to actually admit you have a problem so you can overcome that problem. It's typically how that works. So if you can't admit you have a problem, then you would never overcome that problem. You never would address it, and you would never be able to get over it. That's pretty much all it really is. Is pump and dump is nothing more than a bad habit, or being an addict for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, you're a slave to your flesh, and you're a slave to a woman. Because now, not only a slave to your flesh, you done wasted 40 to 45 minutes of your time having sex when you could have spent that bettering yourself or getting money. You see what I'm saying? And when I say 40 minutes, I'm basically going off my time. I don't know what everybody else's time is. So I'm assuming everybody runs around the same time as me. But like you spend 40 to 45 minutes of your time wasted that you can't get back, all for pleasure. Not for learning anything, not from getting any money, not from starting a business, not from any other knowledge or, any other type of training that you got going on in your life. You basically took all that. You took all that stuff. You took all that and you basically wasted all that. You did all that and it's just wasted effort on your part by just pumping and dumping. Because you just gave, on top of that, we always talk about, we don't want to give women attention or don't give women attention. You just literally gave women attention. When you pump and dump, not only are you giving yourself validation, you're giving that woman that you pumped and dumped validation. This is typically one of the many reasons why we got women running around here thinking that they deserve 10s and 8s and 9s and 12s and shit like that when they're only like a 1 or a 2 or a 3 basically. So it's one of those things where you actually participating in an entitlement of women. On top of that, you're actually participating in the whole entire notion of validation for women. Even though you say you don't validate women, pumping and dumping, you're validating women and you're validating yourself. That's typically how this stuff works. You're validating women and you're validating yourself. It is what it is. So at the end of the day, when you validate a woman, when you validate yourself, you're validating that woman that you just had sex with. Because the sad part about that, you just gave this woman attention. And what do we say about attention? Attention is currency to women. That's typically how that works. So what you can't tell me it's different for the fact that you're still expending the same amount of energy, time, and effort on a woman. You may not be keeping her around, but you're spending that same amount of energy and time on a woman at the end of the day. So it's one of those things where like you have to understand the full value of time. So you won't end up putting yourself in that situation. If you don't understand the whole entire concept of time, you can't say you have control over your body when in fact you're pumping and dumping on a regular. Hell, I don't even pump and dump. I don't even pump that much shit in a week. You're basically validating women. And at the end of the day, as America's DeVille said, you're destroying pair bonding also. Distorting her reality in all technicality. So that's pretty much what you're doing. You're distorting her reality, you're messing up her pair bonding, and you're validating that woman while you're trying to validate yourself and get one good feeling off for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, once you think about it, once you have sex and you get it out your system, you're no longer thinking about sex and you feel better. You feel like a weight's been lifted off your shoulders. The sad part about that is it takes more mental energy to control that urge than you do expending energy having sex. So it ends up going back to one of those things where it's like you're picking the easy road out, basically, instead of spending the proper energy to have mind over matter. It's typically why I was, always nod my head to the no fat people, because they're practicing mind over matter. It's typically how that works. So I don't have anything against the no fat community. It is what it is. They do what they do, and they're better for it for all intents and purposes. And it does actually have beneficial effects when you do no fat. Um, Medically, they've actually proven that medically. They've done medical studies on that. So you typically have a better overall outcome when it comes to exercises in your overall life, and the energy that you have in your day, because you transmog it into like actual energy, and or you know anything that you could possibly need, concentration, energy, and all this stuff, basically, let it be mentally, emotionally, or physically. You pretty much transmog that sexual energy into actually something else. You take it, you change it, and you focus it towards other things. It'd be basically like if you were doing Tai Chi, when you do the one movement where you take and you pull your foot back and you pick up your arms, and you push your legs out while you're pushing your arms out. You're basically focusing that energy right towards that actual object or whatever you're doing for all intents and purposes. That's typically how this works. So at the end of the day, in a nutshell, you're basically doing everything that you're talking against basically doing. You might say that all these other men are doing this stuff and you're simps and this, that, and the other. You're simping for your own pleasure for all intents and purposes, if you want to get technical. If you want to basically use that in a roundabout way, you're basically giving her validation, and you're basically thinking with your reptilian brain when you get into pump and dump for all intents and purposes. I get that a lot of people want that, and that's what they do. That's what you do. But at the end of the day, you just have to know that that's what you're doing. It'd be no different than a person who smokes every day, or it'd be no different than a person that takes drugs on a regular basis. You're basically addicted to something, and that's your addiction, or that's your vice, as what they refer to it in like various circles. So it's one of those things you have to understand this, and that's pretty much all it really is at the end of the day. Um, Moving right along to the alphas, the whole entire alpha concept versus what it used to be versus what it's now is skewed and watered down in its fiction. It's basically science fiction what alpha males are today for all intents and purposes. Because what an alpha male actually is and what it used to be is totally different than what we're trying to actually paint it or make it in this day and age. A good example of alpha males today is animals. Good example of that is animals. So typically what happens with animals in a pride or a troop or a pack or a congress, or whatever you want to refer to it, a pod or anything like that for all intents and purposes, is all the stuff that we preach about being alpha in the manosphere is not even alpha. It's basically some convoluted, made up bullshit to basically sell a product for all intents and purposes. Pickup artistry. That's all it really is. Pickup artistry in a nutshell. So typically what alphas actually do in these pods or packs or, congresses or groups or prides or whatever you want to call it, whatever group they want to refer to them as, basically typically the alpha males in these groups literally take hand in raising the children. They care and nurture the children and this, that, and the other, and they do all this stuff. And they also their they link the respective groups also in the same token, but they do take a hand in actually raising the children for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where it's like what they preach now about an alpha male is totally different than what an alpha male used to be. Typically, most alpha males back in the day pretty much ran off this same premise. Even the ones from the 50s and 60s. Your dad was a hard ass, but he still spent time with you. Nowadays, for a man to spend time with his children, he's seen as a wimp, or he's seen as a beta male, or he's seen as all this stuff, or he's seen as a wuss, basically. The sad part about that is, if you look at the prides and the packs that are strong, the strongest, the alpha male actually takes care of all the children, takes care of some of the children in the pride or the pack or or the Congress or the troop or the whatever you want to refer to it, they basically take care of the children within their. They take time teaching the children how to do various things. When the children aren't playing with each other, they take time to actually play with the children to teach them how to hunt, fight, kick, punch, hunt, all that stuff basically. And that's simply how it works. So you're always there for your family. The only way you'll abandon your family or not do anything with your family unless you get deposed from the pride. Sad part about that is if you get deposed from the pride, all the children get deposed from the pride too. So all the children in the pride automatically got to go bye-byes for all intents and purposes. So it typically ends up being one of those things where, you know, typically that's the only way you'll be abandoned or you'll abandon children basically is if you lose and get deposed by the next upcoming alpha. It's simply how that works. But for all intents and purposes, most prides, pods, packs, troops, congresses or groups basically, they have a hierarchy and they have a leadership basically, and that leader does take time to actually care for children. And his version of care for children would basically be your usual, like it'd be equivalent to playing catch with your son or your daughter, or wrestling with your son or daughter, or teaching them how to do martial arts, or anything like that, or anything along the lines of that. For all intents and purposes, is typically how that works. So it's one of those things where nowadays, in this day and age, men can't do that because it's been replaced by a family court or in the government for all intents and purposes. The sad part about that is they pretty much tied men's hands behind their backs and took away all their power as they punch them in the face. So think of men today as nothing more than men that have been handcuffed, that people are just kicking in the face and kicking in the nuts. That's typically the men of the day when it comes to the government, and it comes to child support, and it comes to the divorce court and all that stuff. That's pretty much all you're really doing to men nowadays, is pretty much handcuffing their hands behind their back and taking advantage of opportunity to take advantage of a man who can't defend himself for all intents and purposes, is all that they're really doing in this day and age. And that's pretty much how it works, because nobody wants to fight a man whose hands are free, because then he's a more dangerous man when his hands are free. It's basically like what they say about, like, good example of that is if you don't bound, like if you ever played like RPG games and stuff like that, or seen like stories where, stories, if you don't bound the wizard's hands, you're probably going to die at the hands of that wizard. You can pretty much, strap him to anything, but if his hands aren't bound, there's a high chance he can conjure up a spell that'll fuck up everybody. And that's typically how men are viewed in this day and age, by handcuffing their hands behind their back. They're basically that wizard or that mage, that powerful mage, that if you don't control their hands, all hell will break loose and all hell will rain down on you. So that's typically that concept when it comes down to it. When it comes to the alpha male, there's no longer any alpha males for this reason, because all the men had their hands handcuffed behind their back. It's pretty much how it works. So it's one of those things where it's like, think of it like this. All the men in the world are lined up, and the government and women are sitting there. The women are kicking them in the nuts, and the government's kicking them across the face like they're Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's pretty much men in a nutshell in this world. And the sad part about it, like I said, you literally have to handcuff a man's hands, because if you don't handcuff his hands, he's more dangerous. All hell will break loose if you don't handcuff his hands. That's typically how this stuff works. So that's typically how all this stuff works. And the sad part about that is, if you've been to the divorce court or you've been to child support court, you pretty much know this feeling. You pretty much know how this fucking feels. I've watched it. I've dealt with men who actually been through child support court that was at the end of their pitiful rope. And I've actually seen all this stuff on a regular basis, to the point where it's like, damn, that nigga really got his hands handcuffed behind his back. And this woman's over there kicking him in the nuts, and the government's sitting there kicking him in the face like they Jean-Claude Van Damme. And that's pretty much how it works. And that's literally the most visceral scene I can actually literally give you. You're nothing more than a man with his hands handcuffed behind his back. The woman is kicking you in the nuts, and the government's Jean-Claude Van Damme kicking you in the face. Think of it like that. That's pretty much how it is in this day and age. And this is the problem with the overall alphas. And the sad part about that is, what an alpha is and what an alpha used to be is two totally different things. Because the packaging of an alpha today is nothing more than a repackaging of what the PUAs basically put forth as what an alpha is. The sad part about that is alphas aren't assholes. I might be an asshole, but alphas aren't really assholes. They give tough love. They're steadfast. Alphas based. Here's pretty much the characteristics of an alpha. A real alpha, not the fake alphas. Alphas of the day, back in the day, they were basically steadfast. They were there for their family. They supported their children and their wife whenever needed, whenever necessary. They pretty much helped their children grow and be independent. On top of that, they gave tough love, and they basically were the firm hand when the pimp hand needed to be laid down. So that's an alpha in a nutshell. What they teach you in alpha is today is a guy that's an asshole who looks good and has a lot of money and all this other crazy shit. That's not an alpha. That's not an alpha in the least bit. That's basically some fantasized fictional alpha. Not all alphas are assholes, unfortunately. All alphas aren't really assholes. It's more or less tough love that they give. They're not assholes. There's a difference between tough love and being an asshole. I'm an asshole. Red Foreman gives tough love. If you don't know who Red Foreman is, think of that '70s show, the dad from that '70s show. He gives tough love. I'm an asshole. Big contrasting difference between the two human beings. He might say a lot of things, but at the end of the day, he still loves his son unconditionally. Whereas I'm just an asshole. I'm gonna laugh at you if you fall. I'm gonna think of the craziest things to do to you and shit like that for all intents and purposes. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, that's typically how this stuff works. So when you actually run into these problems and you're dealing with a lot of this stuff, that's typically what they paint an alpha as today is total bullshit. Because the sad part about that, the difference between alphas of yesteryear and alphas of today is alphas of today require attention to actually be confirmed to be an alpha. Because the sad part about that, alphas of today actually require attention. So everybody has to pretty much co-sign that the person they're looking at is an alpha for the alphas of today. So at the end of the day, if you're an alpha of today, everybody in the room has to co-sign that you're an alpha and we're all going to follow you, or you're the man of the party, you're the life of the party, you're all this stuff. That's typically how this shit works. So if nobody's co-signing on you being the alpha, you're not really an alpha. You can't say I'm an alpha and nobody else co-signed on you being an alpha in this day and age. That's typically how this shit works. And the sad part about that, if you've ever noticed, the difference between an alpha today and an alpha of yesteryears is the alphas of today, if they're deposed by another alpha, they get emotional and they pipe up and they go back and they lick their wounds, or they go back emotionally and they'll try to like basically think of any emotional way to destroy the alpha that they basically had. So it's one of those things where you have to be able to basically know the difference between what an alpha was back in the day and what an alpha is today. Alphas used to be, they don't need no confirmation or nobody telling them that they're an alpha. That's pretty much what alphas were back in the day. They don't need you to tell them an alpha. Nowadays, you need a room full of people to pretty much confirm that you're an alpha to actually be an alpha. Back in the day, it didn't matter if you had a room full of people or not. You're an alpha. You're an alpha. You're an alpha. You're an alpha. And the sad part about that, back in the day, a lot of alphas actually coexisted instead of fought each other, unlike what they do today. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of alphas of yesteryears just coexisted with each other like they were more like sigmas, and they pretty much got along. Alphas of today, they're always trying to showboat and show off like they're the biggest, baddest person on it, person around for all intents and purposes, and that's not how this works. Only time you need to show off is when you're actually being threatened. If you're not being threatened, you don't need to show off, or you don't need to try to one-up somebody for all intents and purposes. That's typically not how that doesn't work. And the sad part about that, you got a lot of people running around here that think they're alphas that really aren't alphas. They're basically science fiction alphas is what I refer to them, or, fictional alphas in their mind. And it's one of those things where I look at somebody and go, it's your story, you tell it how you want to, pimpin'. And it's pretty much how I feel about those people who do shit like that. And the sad part about that is you run into all these people, and the sad part about that, the alphas of yesteryear and the alphas of today, Alphas of today are more likely to be cheated on than alphas of yesteryear. That's pretty much how it works. So all these wannabe alphas are getting cheated on in this day and age because they're not real alphas. They're not real. They're not really who they think they are or who they believe themselves to be. So typically they get cheated on. This is typically why pickup artists preach this, because it's very hard to be cheated on if you spinning a bunch of plates. Because if you actually were an alpha, you wouldn't have to spin that many plates. You see what I'm saying? That's pretty much how it works. So it's one of those things where an alpha can actually commit to something, do it, and follow through. That's pretty much what an alpha does. He commits to something and follows it through. Whereas these people are fake alphas and they don't commit to any damn thing because they're scared. They're scared little boys for all intents and purposes. So they have to preach this and make it sound like they're cool and big and tough and all this stuff. And they're really not. They're just scared little kids. That's all they really are, scared little kids. And the sad part about that is that's pretty much what you're dealing with. All these people who claim they're alpha are nothing more than scared little kids, or as I like to call them, scared little boys. And that's pretty much all they really are. And that's all they'll ever be. Because if the minute you challenge them, or the minute they get a whiff of challenge, they'll either back down or try to act tough or try to peacock, and that's all they'll do. They're not willing to do anything extra. Like me, I ain't got no problem with slitting somebody's throat, shooting somebody in the, shoving a gun in somebody's mouth and blowing their brains out the back of their head. I ain't got no problem with none of that stuff. But these motherfuckers, on the other hand, they wouldn't bust a grape in a fruit fight. That's typically how that works. But at the end of the day, I'm not an alpha, but I'm willing to let you know that you're not an alpha if need be. It's typically how it works. So it's one of those things where you have to understand what it is you're dealing with and how it actually works. And yeah, you're right, Sos. What's up, Lord Sos? It pretty much is a society of Peter Pans for all intents and purposes. So they're nothing more than a bunch of Peter Pans running around here, never wanting to grow up and wanting to relive their glory days. That's all it really is. And the sad part about that is you have to grow up, and you have to grow up eventually. You have to understand that you're going to get older, so you have to take on knowledge so you can still be at the top of your game in a fight for all intents and purposes, because you're not always going to be as fast as you are. You're not always going to be as strong as you are. And that's pretty much how this shit works. So yeah, moving right along to the last topic of this stream, and that's maintaining frame. The whole entire talking point of maintaining frame. Now, if you've ever met me, I'm in a heartbeat. I'm an asshole. However, at the end of the day, there's no such thing as maintaining frame. Let's just keep it 100. I'm never going to make this shit even remotely complicated. There's no such thing as maintaining frame, because at the end of the day, it's nothing more than another talking point or another pseudo alpha quality is all it really is. And the sad part of it's a pseudoscience alpha quality, basically, that nobody really does. The sad part about that is you can't maintain frame and then try to fake it the whole entire time. Because if you don't have a frame to maintain in the first damn place, or you don't have a strong frame to maintain in the first damn place, you might as well just quit and not even do it. This is typically why people that always talk about maintaining frame aren't in long-term relationships, or people who maintain frame, never had a successful relationship, because there's no such thing as maintaining frame. I don't even maintain frame. I'm an asshole, and I typically use when it comes to my frame, I typically take from the Vedic tradition. And typically what I mean by that is I typically take from the Hindu tradition when it comes down to it. I don't have to maintain no frame because I have religion or culture for all intents and purposes. And what I mean by that is ananja. That's typically the third eye for all intents and purposes. This is typically how I could control a whole entire conversation or a room, or people that surround me for all intents and purposes. Let it be a woman, let it be children, let it be all that stuff. Is the sixth gate, basically. I use the sixth gate to actually maintain my surrounding if I have to. I very rarely use the sixth gate in an argument, but I use the sixth gate to basically maintain my environment for all intents and purposes and keep track of everything that's going on in my environment. That's typically how that works. So I don't maintain frame at all. I just basically keep track of my environment and control my environment and understand my environment and use my environment to my advantage. So typically when I say something like to somebody in the live stream, like, I've heard this argument before. I've literally heard this argument before. I've heard this argument argued 7 different ways from Sunday, a billion different ways from Saturday, and 9 billion different ways from the end of this year. So it's one of those things where if I tell you that I've heard this argument before, I've literally heard this argument before. So there's no way around you actually trying to tell me something that I already don't know when I've already heard this argument before. So the problem with maintaining frame is nothing more than a fake facade that you're putting on for other people. Like I said, I'm an asshole. That has no frame whatsoever. That requires 0 frame for me to be an asshole. I was raised an asshole. I was born an asshole. And I'm still an asshole till this day. I'm going to say the most vulgar, most craziest, most off the wall shit to people. And if that's how I feel, that's how I feel. And if your feelings are hurt by it, I don't care because I'm an asshole. And that's typically all it really is. And every now and again, if I have to, I could be a condescending prick. Does that require maintaining a frame? No. It's just who I am as a human being. No frame required to actually do it because that's who I am as a human being. I don't need no frame to actually say that I'm maintaining frame when in fact I'm not maintaining frame at all. I'm maintaining who the hell I am as a human being. I'm willing to actually admit who I am as a human being and put that forward and let everybody understand who I am as a human being. This is typically why I get away with a lot of shit and say a lot of shit and people are like, oh, that was fucked up. Tika, you might not want to say that. Well, no, I can say shit like that because I am who I am and I commit known it. That's the difference between maintaining frame and actually being a person, actually something being a part of your character. There's no such thing as maintaining frame for the fact that you're nothing. If you have to maintain frame, you're doing nothing more than pretending or propping yourself up or peacocking. That's pretty much all you're doing. I don't need the peacock. I just show up and we find out who the hell's really who and who's what and what's what and what's not what. That's pretty much how it works. Like, I don't need to peacock or pull out a gun or pull out a knife to do any damn thing. My presence alone is enough for 99% of the 98% of the majority of the conflicts. My presence alone is enough. I don't need to break out extra shit or extra pseudoscience to actually. I don't need to break out extra anything to actually basically be able to do what I do. Basically, like I said, I refer to it as I use my 6 gate, and that's about it. That's pretty much all it really is. Every now and again, I might have to use a 7 gate, but most of the times when I'm actually trying to maintain my environment and people in it, I'm only using my 6 gate. That's pretty much what it is. Now, when I'm in a fight, and when I'm in an actual all-out fight, I use my 7th gate basically for a fight. For all-out fight or all-out, especially if there's a gunfight, you don't know where the bullets are whizzing to or anything like that. I typically use a 7th gate if I'm in a gunfight or all-out combat fight or a martial arts fight or if I'm in a tournament where I'm actually doing martial arts, I typically use a 7th gate for that reason, for the fact that I can keep track of all the shit. Usually in conversations or in podcasts or in live streams, I use it to basically keep track of everybody in there and everybody's argument and everybody's choice of words and how they're trying to argue things. Basically, I use my 6th gate to do that. Typically, when I argue with people, I use my 5th gate or 4th gate to argue with people. I very rarely have to go to the 6th gate to argue with somebody for all intents and purposes because I just use that to keep track of everybody and what everybody said and the stuff that people say. So it's one of those things where I never have to maintain a frame because there's no frame to maintain for the fact that I am who I am. So therefore, that should be enough. What's up, Seeker? So it's one of those things as a human being where all this stuff is nothing more than fake science or to try to make somebody feel good about themselves or try to help somebody prop themselves up. Think of it like this. The best way I can describe maintaining frame to you in this day and age is take Stephen Hawking. Get some sticks and get some stuff and just prop him up standing up, basically. And that's pretty much what maintaining a frame is. Take Stephen Hawking, prop him up on some sticks and some poles and some pulleys and make it look like he can stand. That's pretty much what maintaining frame is in this day and age. That's the most visceral look I can actually give you for maintaining frame. And I'm sorry that I used Stephen Hawking. Homie, rest in peace. I'm sorry about that. But that's pretty much all it really is. It'd be no different than taking Stephen Hawking's, getting some pulleys, some ropes, and some sticks, and making him look like he can stand and walk. That's pretty much all it is. Or my favorite is the movie Weekend at Bernie's, if you haven't seen it, where they made a dead man look like he was alive the whole entire time by attaching rope to him and having them fake wave and stuff like that in the car, having them fake drive and stuff like that. It's pretty much all you're really doing. So maintaining frame would be equivalent to a Weekend at Bernie's, where they're propping up a dead guy that's really dead. That's simply all it really is. And the sad part about that, there's going to be a lot of butthurt people, but it is what it is, and that's the truth. If you don't like it, that's just too damn bad. If I hurt your feelings, I don't care. That's something you need to work on to better yourself. And that's exactly how I feel. Well, Tico, you're an asshole. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a compliment to me. So it's one of those things where you have to understand that the new whole entire maintaining your frame and the new version of what an alpha is nothing more than a court gesture. Or a it's either a court gesture or a performance artist. Basically, think of it like the alphas of today and the people who maintain, quote unquote, maintain frame are nothing more than drama students. Basically, they're pretty much all actors. They're all drama students that's basically trying to prop themselves up to make themselves sound big. Think of them like the good example of that is maintaining frame is nothing more than, Napoleon complex. The alphas of today are nothing more than Napoleon complex, basically. They can't live up to it, so they gotta overexert themselves or overdo themselves to make it seem like they're bigger or better than what they really are. That's all they are nothing more than people with Napoleon complex. So it's pretty much how it works. The sad part about that is it's going to suck and it's going to hurt your feelings, but it is what it is. So all this maintaining and frame shit ain't shit. If you didn't have it when you were born, you're never going to have it at all. If you didn't have it when you were a kid, you basically got to work with what you actually have about yourself whatever you were told not to use growing up. Like if you have an attitude, or if you're an asshole, or if you're arrogant, or you're a dick, pretty much use all that stuff that you were when you were a kid that you were told not to use, and you will better yourself much better, much faster, because you're being yourself. You're being your authentic self. So if you're a condescending prick, be a condescending prick. If you're an asshole, be an asshole. Don't fake being an asshole. Be an asshole if you're really an asshole. If you're a condescending prick, be a condescending prick if you're really a condescending prick. That's pretty much how this works. Don't fake anything. Don't try to prop yourself up. Don't have no fake Napoleon complex, basically. You don't need none of that shit. Just be your fucking self and be yourself to the best you could possibly be. If you're something that's on your mind and you want to say it, just fucking say it. It's that simple. Don't be saying stuff to try to be cool. Say it because that's literally was something that you really wanted to say. Don't be saying something to try to fit in to be cool with all the group. Say it because you want to say it. And the sad part about that, the difference between saying stuff to fit in with the group and saying stuff because you want to say it is, you might hurt somebody's feelings if you just want to say it, versus if you're trying to fit in with the group, people can tell you're trying to fit in too much or you're trying too hard. People usually can tell the difference between a try hard and a person that's actually being natural about it. And the funny thing about that is, if you're a pickup artist, or if you're trying to maintain frame, or you're trying to be an alpha, you're doing nothing more than that. You're pretty much just faking it till you make it. And faking it till you make it only works in certain areas. That's pretty much how it works. The Human Encyclopedia, thanks. He said Hawkins had to get mentioned at some point. Yeah, pretty much. Fots, yeah, pretty much, yeah. The sad part about that is, at the end of the day, all these things that we use in a manosphere, that we hear people use, are nothing more than special props. Like I said, I debunked every single last one of those things, those 5 talking points. I have more talking points, but I'll save that for another video because I don't want to drag this video on any longer than it needs to go on. But all those extra talking points really aren't shit. They're nothing more than a part of something bigger, or nothing more than a part of like a certain part of the red pill community, basically. Like I said, this whole entire alpha male, this new alpha male, and this new maintain maintain your frame is nothing more than a byproduct of pickup artists. That's all it is. There's a fundamental difference between what an alpha used to be and what an alpha is today. Fundamental difference, drastically dire differences, basically. And like I said, when it comes to the black pill community, they're nothing more than a subsection of the red pill. Just like we always say, every MGTOW is red pill, but not all red pills are MGTOW. Same thing goes for black pillars. All black pillars are red pill, but not all red pillars are black pill, which means you come from this community that is the red pill. Whether you like it or not, there's nothing else you could do, and you're nothing more than a specialized group of people within a red pill manosphere for all intents and purposes. You're nothing more than a specialized group. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to red pill knowledge, it's vast. We just don't talk about this stuff, that stuff, and that stuff. There's a vast knowledge that you can actually learn from the red pill community. This is typically why I always refer to it as bleeding edge red pill. Because people, these are portions of the red pill nobody ever really looks into, nobody ever really talks about, because they're trying to appease their population or their listeners for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, if you know nothing about these, you won't talk about them. The neat thing about red pill is the red pill goes into politics. The red pill goes into all this other shit. The red pill goes into like various different things. So you don't really need black pill at all to be red pill. At the end of the day, because like I said, I don't use any black pill shit, but I've had black pillars in my own live stream. I have black pillars that thought they could never be black pilled. So it's one of those things where it's like, at the end of the day, you have to realize that you're doing nothing more than taking a group of a way of thinking, and you're trying to specialize it and make it so that this is this. When in fact, all you have to do is be red pill. Less complicated, just be red pill. Now, I can understand the MGTOW community, they're perfectly fine. They're fine. However, black pill community, you're nothing more than a small subsection of red pill. That's all it really is. Just like MGTOW is. However, MGTOW requires more knowledge than it does to actually be black pill, because black pill only focuses on certain things and certain aspects of the red pill, whereas MGTOW focuses on a larger group of things when it comes to the red pill for all intents and purposes. It's not quite the red pill, but MGTOW is doing what they do specialize in, and they're doing what they do best. And the sad part about that, like I said, it takes more knowledge to be MGTOW than it takes to be a black pillar. Hate to break it to you, but it's true. Like I said, a monk and a prepper actually has more knowledge than a black pillar. At the end of the day, hate to be savage like that, but it's true. A monk and a prepper has more knowledge than a black pillar. Hell, a level 4 has more knowledge than a black pillar. A level 3 has equal knowledge to a black pillar. I would say like a level 4 usually fluctuates between as much knowledge or more knowledge than a black pillar, and a level 3 either has just below or just the same amount of knowledge as a black pillar. That's typically how this stuff works. The only people that you beat out is level 2s and level 1s. That's it. So it's one of those things where if you ever notice that black pillars will come in my live stream and they try to black pill me, and I just look at them like, yeah, right. Anyways, back to this. back to our sponsors, basically. So it's one of those things where like you can never there's not a black pillar out there that can black pill me for all intents and purposes. There's not one out there. None of them out there can black pill me, because I have more knowledge than they will ever have when it comes to black pill. Because at the end of the day, like I said, when it comes down to it, I pay attention to everything using the Vedic tradition. Anya, basically. So at the end of the day, I would always be several steps ahead of you if you're a black pillar, if you're in my stream, no matter how you like it, no matter what you want to say about it. Because at the end of the day, a good example of somebody who can black pill the hell out of a black pillar is TFM. He talks about a vast majority of shit. But he doesn't call himself a black pillar. You see what I'm saying? He talks about a vast majority of shit. He can argue with anything on anything for anybody for everything at the drop of a hat. He doesn't have to call himself a black pillar because he's literally black pillars in his own live stream, and that's typically how this stuff works. So get rid of all this pseudoscience crap and actually try to better yourself and become a better human being. Spans above us. True. The spans. Authentic self. Yeah, true. Authentic self, most definitely. Um, yeah, and that was actually pretty fun. That was actually a pretty fun stream. Um, Wind. What's up, Wind? I see you're in here somewhere. I just passed by you. What's up, McTown to Wind? And the sad part about that, like I said, I wouldn't. I do black pill stuff on my channel, but I just refer to it as internal sadist. I'll refer to it as bleeding edge red pill. That's all it really is. Because you're nothing more than a red pillar that got a specialized title. That's all it is. You just specialize in this stuff, and we'll let you have your little section of the universe. Make Tyler specialize in this, we'll let them have their little section of the universe. Everybody specializes in certain things. PUA specializes in this, we'll let them have their section of the universe. The sad part about that is we refer to it as manosphere, but the sad part about that is you're all within the red pill philosophy at the end of the day. No matter if you like it or not, you're all a part of the red pill philosophy. Because at the end of the day, like I said, every single one of those groups are red pill, but not all red pills are you. You see what I'm saying? So what that means is you specialize in a certain thing, certain aspect of the red pill, whether you like it or not, whether you're black pill, red pill, pickup artist, whatever, some new title, anything, you're pretty much specialized in a certain portion of the red pill, whether you like it or not. That's typically how this stuff works. If you're the casual bachelor, the free agent, the anybody, you pretty much specialize in a certain section of the red pill. That's all it is. That's all it would ever be. So keep on taking your red pills and keep on loving it. This is your boy Tico Trent, aka the Internal Sadist, and I'm out, my boys. Have a good afternoon and see y'all for Friday Night Blaze. Adios.